on the one hand, it's great that it's kind of flexible and case by case. On the other hand, it's terrible that it's kind of flexible and case by case because, if you had sort of a bright line rule where, if you cohabitate for 6 months, you're just default presumed to be married. Well, that can screw you a lot of times, but also it's kind of easier to live with because if it becomes kind of common knowledge that kind of everybody knows, it's easier to operite.
It'll certainly speed up a lot of relationships. So at that 6 month thing,
let's have
let's have that conversation. So where's this going?
Most people's mind are just blown at how Texas deals with common law marriage.
I agree. I get a lot of clients that have an understanding of it that they think meets the statute or the requirements to be common law married. Mm-hmm. They'll come in and they'll say things like, oh, we live together. Oh, we have kids together. And we've been together a long time, so we must be common law married. Some people even think if they've lived together for 2 years. And that's because of a misnomer. There's a rebuttable presumption of a common law marriage for up to 2 years after you've separated. And so people hear different things and then they just make these assumptions. And so very specific requirements have to be met for someone to be common law married.
As I understand it, and you can correct me and maybe you deal with them differently, but you do need to cohabitate together in order to be considered married. Like that's pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I think they refer to it as cohabitate as husband and wife.
Right.
So it's not like a roommate situation or, you're actually supposed to be intimate in consummating kind of the relationship.
It's funny. I actually have a case right now where somebody is claiming to be the wife, but they're totally roommates. They did not, share a bed together, and there's another guy living in the house with them. So it's like, that's going to be hard because you're right. It's not just that they resided together. It's, did they cohabitate as husband and wife?
Right.
And I think that's the one that I think a lot of people have. But when you get into some of these others, a lot of times not so much. So another one that is common is this holding out requirement. And
that's right. Yeah. In family law, that's one of the hardest ones for us to get past, right? Because in this context, it's holding out to the public. It's not just telling your brother or your sister, oh, this is my husband. It's actually holding out to people at work, your church, your community, the cashier at the 7-Eleven. I mean, you have to be able to bring in witnesses, people that you've met in the normal average day that can come in and say, oh yeah, that's his wife, that's her husband. And, actually can testify that representation was made.
I hear it all the time. It's like, well, my common law husband died. And, between the two of us, we always referred to each other as husband and wife. That's not going to get it. That's not going to meet the holding out requirement because like Brian was saying, what you'd have to do is say to other people, when I introduce this person as this is my husband, this is my wife. And if you don't have that kind of communally, that holding out, I don't think you're going to pass that test.
I've had people come in and they testify, they have their brother or their mom or cousin come in and say, oh yeah, they once said that they were married. But that's not enough. I mean, making one announcement, it's the habitual, constant representation to others in behaving as if you're married. Like, this is my wife at the Christmas party with all the coworkers, and down at the bank, they know we're married because we always do our accounts together. That kind of thing. It's not just one person heard you say it one time.
Even if I have a case where the couple cohabitated together and they held themselves out, but they don't have anything together and any documentation whatsoever. There's not a shred of paper that says husband and wife. I think that makes it harder for a judge or jury to say, yeah.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think a big deal here is having to show that constant presence of the husband-wife situation. If you file your taxes together, if you have joint accounts together, if you're listed on the other person's insurance as a spouse, where the judge or the jury can take a look at it and say, oh, I see, overall, they've held themselves out to everyone in the community. They filed their taxes together. They had joint accounts. They call each other husband and wife in their greeting cards and holiday cards. And overall, if you ask someone that they know that's close to them, they would refer to them as a married couple. And that generally is where you get have to get to in order to overcome that holding out standard?
The one that just really trips people up is you have to have an agreement to be married. And like I had this, it was just a brilliant, sometimes I have a Perry Mason moment, like I go into an alter ego in the courtroom and I just kind of surprise myself. I had this lady on the stand who claimed to be the common law wife, right? And so I'm taking her testimony, and I know all these factors about cohabitation and, holding out and things like that, but she knew those factors as well. So when I asked her, hey, how did you introduce? Oh, we always introduced ourselves as husband and wife. Of course, when we went to parties and da 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 da. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. And we lived together, and we lived together for all these years. And okay, yeah. And then I ask her, what was the date you agreed to be married? And she said, well, I mean, I'm not really sure. It was kind of da 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 da. And I said, Your Honor, objection, non-responsive. What was the date that you agreed to be married? Well, it was kind of, we started staying together, and then we just kind of, again, Your Honor, objection, non-responsive. I need to know the date of your agreement to be married, because the judge needs to find, or jury needs to find, that there was an agreement to be married, kind of like a partnership agreement. You can't just kind of like sleepwalk into a partnership agreement. You have an agreement. It's the same thing in the marital.
But you have to have intention.
You have to have intention.
Yeah. I mean,
because it's rights. It's legal rights.
Yeah, you can't accidentally be married.
You can't accidentally be married.
Yeah, that's why you look for the agreement to be married.
Right.
Because you're looking for that very specific intent.
Yes.
These two chose on this date to be married.
Yeah.
And that's very important for the law, because especially in my side, and I know it falls into ISE&x after people pass away, but is the inception of title rule is a major factor here, because when you buy a home, it gets characterized. And if you're not married, it's separate. If you're married, it's community. So if the date of marriage is before the purchase, then that's a community asset. If it's after the date of purchase, then it's a separate asset. And so the date absolutely is necessary. They can't just say, at some point in time they need to actually say on March 1st, 2022 or 2024, this is the date we got married. So the court will know what the start of the creation of community estate is.
In that same case, the judge said, ma'am, you need to have a date. And so she just pulls a date out of her hiney. Well, what she didn't know was that I knew that the guy had been married previously and he had filed for divorce. And the divorce date wasn't until after the date that she said they had their agreement to be married. You can't be married 2 times at once.
Yeah, that's another burden to overcome.
Yeah. So she totally shot herself in the foot because she just made up the wrong date. And so, the judge dismissed her and said, man, you can't have been married to that guy because he was married to somebody else. And it really also created a situation where the judge doubted her credibility, and the judge lectured her on perjury.
I can imagine that being an awkward situation that she created for herself. In the story context, I had one where it actually was a really close determination for the judge. He struggled with making the decision because they had lived together for a long time. They did have some joint accounts. They actually filed, my client had filed claiming the other person on his taxes. So there was some reciprocal relationship there with saying, I've supported this person, taken care of this person. And there was some communications to a few other people that they were married. But we had a text message that the girlfriend, our position, of course, the girlfriend, had sent to my client stating, well, if that's how you behave, I'm not going to marry you.
Oh,
and so it showed a very
killer.
Clear position that she didn't consider herself married at that time.
Right.
Because if you did, you wouldn't be getting married in the future.
You can't marry again.
Yeah. Now, if you had said something along the lines of like, well, when we do our ceremony to, further demonstrate our marriage, that'd be different. But if you say, I'm not going to marry you in the future, definitely shows a present sense of I'm not married at this time.
I had a case where, this is one where I thought we couldn't meet the burden of there being a common law marriage. And then one of them pulls out a marriage certificate, because you can get
informal.
You can get an informal marriage certificate, and that's going to be a case winner immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, you have on the one hand a ceremonial marriage where you have whatever at the courthouse or church or whatever. You have a ceremony and you have paperwork for that or whatever. But you can also have a non-ceremonial marriage with a certificate where you both sign off on it and say, yeah, we're married, and you've got a certificate. And so people, in this case, they said, we only had a common law marriage. And I'm like, probably not. And they say, well, what about the certificate? I'm like, probably so. You probably do have one then.
And in fact, I think you just push that and you refer to that as an informal marriage.
It's an informal, yeah.
Because you just didn't do the ceremony.
Along the same vein, I had one that, again, I hear the lady talking about, how they held themselves out as married and stuff like that. But I was a little skeptical about her claim to be the surviving wife of the guy who died. But then in the meeting I was having with her, for the first time, she had her neighbor who was a close friend who was at the meeting. And this guy, the neighbor, pulls out a cell phone and says, hey, I got pictures here of their wedding. And I went, what? I thought you were common law married. Well, they hadn't gone and done a marriage license and a certificate or whatever when they had their wedding, but they had a backyard wedding where they exchanged rings. They did kind of a vows type thing. And then from that point forward, he's sending his wife greeting cards that says, to my wife on Mother's Day and happy birthday to my wife. So that to me was like totally different because you got rings, you got, the house that they were cohabitating was in the photo with their wedding. All their friends and family and neighbors are in the picture. So you have a very obvious holding out as husband and wife. They were cohabitating as husband and wife. So that one, it was kind of funny because I judged the book by the cover and, well, this is probably another common law that you may feel like you were married, but legally probably not. And then, boy, when I saw that picture, that kind of changed everything.
Yeah, that's the default, right? Because the burden is on the person asserting the common law.
That's right.
So we always have to start from that skeptical position of we have to prove it. So most people can't. Mm-hmm. And so you really need to show me the evidence because they're going to be scrutinizing it. And so in your situation, like trying to come up with the date that we agreed to be married, that would be pretty easy because they have the ring exchange, they have the backyard ceremony, right? So we've got the agreement to be married date. You've got the holding out because there's all those folks there in public there to be present at the wedding with them. And then they most likely said the I do's and I will. And they've had probably a preacher or someone overseeing it.
Yep.
And then all they had to do is prove that they cohabitated and lived together as husband and wife, which, not a difficult thing that's probably the least difficult of the ones.
Right. There are so many, I guess, just misconceptions about common law marriage in Texas that I feel like so many times I'm the bearer of bad news.
Right.
Because half the time I have somebody who comes in who really wants there to have been a common law marriage.
Or good news.
Right.
Or sometimes it can be good news.
Sometimes it is good news. I'm going to be really honest with people. There are some attorneys that will just kind of tell you whatever you want to hear, to get that retainer deposit. And then, they can act real surprised later when the judge or jury rules the other way and you blew through a ton of money. Like, oh man, you held yourself out and I'm so surprised. Oh, I guess it didn't go our way this time, and just act really surprised. And I just don't do that. It's like, well, I've done this for so long and, myself handled so many cases or seen so many other cases and researched it for so many years that I don't blow smoke.
Obviously, I take a very similar approach. I like to tell my clients all the risks up front. I find myself to be a very risk-averse lawyer, so I like to give that full disclosure. And I'll let them know that the burden's on us if we're asserting it. And I want to make sure that they understand that the court's going to be scrutinizing it, what they're going to be looking for. And a lot of this isn't just because it's the right thing to do. It's also a good thing to do for us long term because,
for sure,
the clients, they may still want to go forward. They may say, no, I want to take that shot. And I'll tell them, I'll take that shot with you. But as long as we're on the same page, because I don't want that surprise moment. I don't want the client at the end of the trial looking at me going, I didn't know that couldn't happen.
Yeah, why didn't you tell me?
Why did you tell me this was going to be like a home run or a slam dunk?
Right.
So I'd rather tell them that, hey, burden's on us.
Yeah.
We've got to get this thing out there in front of the court or the jury, and we've got to carry the burden all the way across the line.
That in and of itself is really the double-edged sword of Texas law on common law marriages. On the one hand, it's great that it's kind of flexible and case by case. On the other hand, it's terrible that it's kind of flexible and case by case. because
Yeah.
if you had sort of a bright line rule where if you cohabitate for 6 months, you're just default presumed to be married. Well, that can screw you a lot of times, but also it's kind of easier to live with, because if it becomes kind of common knowledge that kind of everybody knows, it's easier to operate.
It'll certainly speed up a lot of relationships. So at that 6-month thing,
It's
let's have
179 days.
let's have that conversation. So where's this going? Right? I certainly think it makes a bright line decision making.
Yeah.
Right? Because we go over this line here. I'm going to need a cohabitation agreement.
Yeah.
You know.
By the way, we do cohabitation agreements, so if you need one of those.
Yeah, just so you know, that would be to ensure that you guys went into it knowing that you're not married. So it kind of makes it a formal understanding between the two people, so
that you're not married.
That you're not married,
Right.
not common law married. That way,
Right.
it doesn't come out and surprise you in the end, right?
Right.
But yeah, also think about the concept of why this came about, right? Common law marriage. If you think about from where it would spawn from in a situation about equities, right?
Right.
If you
Fairness.
like if you were to get into a relationship with someone and spend 20 years with them but never formally got married, had kids, and you built this massive estate all in the name of one of the parties, one of the people, and then you get divorced and the other person has no claim at all to anything, and they've given up their 20 years, their earning potential,
Sure.
all their work. And so that's what this is designed for. It's really to capture that, to ensure that there isn't some significant injustice done to people in those situations.
Well, and I also think, some of our laws are old school, but some of that's kind of good. I mean, where I'm going with that is some people just don't have the resources to get a formal marriage. They don't have the money or the time off work or whatever to officially get it done. And they may be thinking, well, why do I need to spend that time and money? We're married.
Right.
So I think sometimes these laws are based in a different date and time that may seem kind of antiquated, but they still have some relevance. We are trying to be fair.
Well, I do think they have relevance in a lot of these claims, right?
Right.
In fact, I'm dealing with one right now where I have, a house is in question because there was a house purchased. They lived together for some years and they have some kids, but the house was purchased in only one person's name, and there is no formal marriage.
Even if you feel like you meet all of the statutory requirements, we held ourselves out, we cohabitated, unless you have like a marriage license and certificate or something like that, you cannot be 100% sure. And so for that reason, smart lawyers are going to say, let's negotiate. Let's talk.
Let's look at the risk. Let's figure out what the value returns are here.
Yeah.
Especially in your world.
Especially my world, because it's found money to everybody. Because
Right.
it's not, in a divorce, it's like, well, we both have to keep on living here, and it's going to be taking some from one and giving to the other or whatever. In my case, somebody's died, and, these heirs, like children of the deceased person, it's kind of found money to them. And so they're more apt to settle. So they'll say, okay, look, she's got a really good case as being the surviving common law wife. I don't know if she's going to win or if she's not going to win, but let's talk turkey. Let's see if we can, split it somehow where, she gets the house, give us the cars, maybe some accounts, and let's split it up some way or another. And very few of them go all the way to trial in my world. I think in yours, probably a lot of them go to trial. But
They actually do, because, in our world, it's not found money. It's usually earned money. And if it's determined there isn't a marriage, that's 100% one person's money.
Right.
And so in knowing that the burden's on the other side, a lot of times the people who are not claiming that they're married will roll the dice. And what we do in that situation, like at least in my practice, I try to bifurcate the trial.
Mhm.
I request that the court will hold a specific trial on just whether there's an existence of a marriage. So that way we don't have to prepare for a full divorce with property type stuff going on if it's just a child custody case.
Mhm.
And so we would do the bifurcation, then we go in and we have the judge rule just specifically on whether there's the existence of a marriage, and then we know how to actually prepare for our final trial.
Right.
And, so we do that, and you can also do it under a summary judgment, which is another tool that you can use to reach out to the court and say, hey, they can't produce evidence of one of these elements, and say they can't carry that burden, and then that shifts to them, and they have to bring that forward.
Mhm.
I see it less in the traditional summary judgment context because there's always ways to rebut things,
Right.
So more in the no evidence one where you're just trying to call somebody's bluff,
Right.
and see what they actually have.
Right. Right. When I do these videos, I like to have some, takeaways. I mean, you're watching this video because you kind of want to know, like, hey, am I married? Or what can I do?
Or do I want to be married?
Or do I want to be married?
Or do I not want to be married?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's helpful for you, to know, hey, how is Texas law going to treat this? And but I want you to know there are some things that you can do. Maybe if you're cohabitating with someone, we kind of alluded to one of them, which is a cohabitation agreement. If you want to have control of this and not be sort of considered accidentally married, get a cohabitation agreement and put it in writing. It doesn't have to be, mean. I mean, you can do kind of we do kind of a nicely worded one, that just says, hey, we like each other, but we're not married. At least not now. Maybe we'll get married at some point in the future, but, until we rescind this document, we're not officially married.
Right. And a lot of the times that you're going to see that kind of thing is when you have actual errors that you want to make sure you can protect, right? If something happened to you, you don't want there to be a lot of fighting or confusion over things.
Right.
And then like Isaac was saying, that creates this negotiation situation. Well, if you've got a cohabitation agreement, that's going to shut down a lot of the claims that the other side can put forward against the estate. And that helps if, say, for instance, the person who passed away really wants his family business or family property to go to his children and not to this, significant person he was spending his life with. Well, that cohabitation agreement will give that protection and ensure that kind of the transfer of that asset.
Mm-hmm. I think if you're already in a cohabitation type situation and you want there to be evidence of a marriage, go get that marriage certificate. I mean, just instead of just kind of leaving it up to litigators in the future to duke it out, don't leave it to chance and case law and statutory stuff. I mean, take the time, go get that certificate.
Yeah, especially if you guys are agreed to do it, right? Because if you are married and you want to make sure that significant other gets taken care of after you pass away, the easy way to do it is to do that informal marriage. That way you can just file it with the state and there's a record of it. And then if it comes to that, you have the document that speaks for itself.
And then the last, I think, takeaway is if you're on the back end of this situation, like let's say there's a separation or somebody's passed away, go see a lawyer. It's worth whatever the consultation fee is or whatever, because like the lady I was mentioning earlier where she had the backyard wedding, she herself didn't want to come in because she was like, we never got the marriage license certificate. So she was like, I don't think from talking with my buddies and stuff that I was legally married, right? It was the neighbor who said, no, I think you got a pretty good case. At least go meet with a lawyer. So I just think, well, that was like probably the best case I've ever had, other than the one where they had a marriage certificate. But other than that, that was about as clear-cut a case for common law marriage as I had ever seen. And that lady almost didn't come in. So, don't lose hope if you're in a separation type situation or someone's passed away, go see a lawyer.
Right. I mean, because the lawyer is going to be incentivized to work with you on those issues.
Yeah.
And so it's important to get that input because, I mean, even just if you find the statute online, Jurist Google or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, you start looking at the situation, even just the plain language of the statute. What does it mean to agree to be married? I mean, that can mean a lot of different things in the eyes of the law, and that's where a lawyer can help guide you. Or what does it mean to live as husband and wife? Does that mean just in the same house? Does that mean with a bank account? And what does it mean to hold yourself out? I mean, a lot of people think that just means you said it one time to one person, or you wrote Mrs. on a card, So, I mean, it's important to go in and get that consulted and have your particular fact set compared against the statute and that lawyer's experience from, case law and actual court behavior to get a good understanding of whether you have a good case.
Yeah, I agree. So, like I said, I like to have some takeaways, so if you're thinking about cohabitating with someone, kind of be cognizant of what the different factors are in common law marriage, maybe consider a cohabitation agreement. If you're in the middle of one, again, if you want to be married, probably go get that marriage certificate. And then if the other side won't agree to do a marriage certificate, be thinking about keeping some of your correspondences. If he's calling you wife and greeting cards, probably hang on to those greeting cards.
Yeah, and try and establish a date, right?
Yeah, and establish that date. Yeah,
because that is important, because again, it may not benefit you to be married after a certain point. I mean, if the asset was already accumulated. So I mean, it's important to know those things. So even if you're in that middle stage and you may potentially have a future issue, go consult a lawyer and find out what the good pieces are in your particular life that can help your situation if a divorce or a death or something was to happen.
I think, and then, if there is a separation or divorce, go see a lawyer. I think sometimes lawyers have done a bad job sort of marketing themselves as helpers. But we really are. I mean,
it's a helping profession for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're not blood-sucking idiots. And the thing is, people are always like, I hate lawyers, I hate lawyers, I hate lawyers, until you want one. And then your lawyer's your best friend. Yeah. You know what I mean? And at least in my case, I think Brian's the same. If I'm not doing something to bring value to your life, I won't even let you hire me, right? And I think most lawyers are that way, right?
I would say more than not.
There are bad ones.
In any profession, you're going to have bad seeds.
Sure. There's bad cops. There's bad everybody.
And bad doctors, bad CPAs. But, in general, I think most lawyers are just people, and most people want to feel like they did something good.
Honorable.
And so in this situation, they want to bring return to their client. Like my statement is, I always want to put my client in a better position at the end of the case than when I found them. So I find you, I want to improve your situation, and I want to send you off in a better place.
Yeah, I can't guarantee you an outcome, right? I mean, but I can make that guarantee.
Yeah, that's my goal, and this is our plan to get there, and I can see a path.
Right.
But you can't see a path if you didn't at least look at the facts and understand what's going on with the case.
You just never know then. And then, and I should say too, there are statutes of limitation. So if somebody passes away, or if you have a separation or whatever, maybe your legal ability just over passage of time might go away. So don't wait around. Go see a lawyer to have it evaluated, and to see if there's some way that they might be able to help you.
Right. There's been more in my career, I don't know about yours, but I've seen more losses because people thought they could figure it out on their own, or didn't want to talk to a lawyer, and so they didn't pay that whatever $300-400 consultation fee, which then ended up costing them 10, 20, 30 times that.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to lay out a few bucks, and then they didn't understand their rights.
Well, the way I thought of it is, like, even if you don't have, maybe you have a nothing burger type situation and you don't get the answer you wanted to hear, that was worth the consultation fee.
Oh, yeah, because you can go to bed at night.
You can go to bed at night and be like, well, at least I know. And, if you've had a lawyer that you've worked with before, I think sometimes that can be a good resource to find another lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Lawyers know who the good lawyers are, right? Because my clients know me. They come back and they'd say, hey, don't send me to that guy. Yeah. I can't believe you even sent me over there. He didn't do a good job.
Yeah, that hurts my reputation. Yeah. You should also know this about me and Brian. We've actually worked on cases together.
Oh, yeah.
We've litigated together. We've been in the trenches together. So, we can really speak personally. And a lot of times when I make a referral, maybe it's even my area of law, but I can't handle it, maybe due to a conflict of interest or something like that. It'll surprise you to know that a lot of times I will refer it to my toughest adversaries. Right? Because they're the best.
Yeah, that's the big compliment.
It's like the one that I don't want to be against in court is most likely to get my referrals because they're good.
Yeah. In fact, it was when I felt like I arrived, when I had clients start coming in, and I'd say, oh, where'd you get my name from? Oh, this lawyer over here, that lawyer over there. And they were lawyers that were opposite me, that I prevailed on the case. And so you knew that they were like, yeah, this guy will do a good job. So, that's when you know that you're arriving at your ability to, represent people.
Right. But I mean, you have to reach out to get help. And I think Google is maybe an okay starting point. But, if you've had, a loved one, or if you've had an interaction with a previous attorney, I think that can be a good place to start with, who should I do a consultation with. All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Boom.